Meet Reid Lance Rosenthal, rancher, #1 best-selling award-winning author, and unabashedly, unapologetically on the right side of the outstanding issues of our generation. But don't try to fence him in. Sometimes his positions will surprise you, because Reid is definitely his own man, with his own opinions. You might love him, you might hate him, but you won't be able to stop listening. Step over to the right side with Reid.
This is Reid Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side Radio, folks. KGAB-AM 650 in the Town Square Network, serving the Intermountain West. Easy 101, Colorado Springs, serving southern Colorado and northern New Mexico. And the Monster 780 out of Denver, serving just about everywhere. So welcome Nebraska to Utah, Montana to New Mexico. Got a great guest for you today. You know, with all this hubbub over Obamacare, a president who lies about his lies, we have somebody who's actually called him out. Not only is it a somebody, but his name is Larry Kawa. He's a doctor, and listen, this is not one of your Republicans throw grandma off the cliffs. Okay, he's a humanitarian. He served on the board of directors of Propel, which is a huge charity that provides braces to underprivileged children. His specialty is dental and orthodontal work. He's been active in the Girl Scouts of America. He's been a volunteer orthodontist for The Haven, which is a home for abused and neglected children, for over 20 years. He's a frequent guest on national TV and radio. The best thing is that he has sued the federal government and Mr. Obama over Obamacare. And unlike that very disappointing lawsuit which John Roberts kind of shoved up our butt, once again based on an Obama lie, it's a penalty, not a tax, his suit has teeth. And there might be an opportunity for a whole bunch of us to join in on other bandwagons and to bring this monstrosity, the government and its bill, down. So without further ado, Larry, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Reid. I appreciate the opportunity.
Listen, Dr. Kawa, and I want to emphasize that, this is a doctor speaking to you folks. You've had pundits on, you've had national names on, you've had proponents, including Timothy Yost. Go back in the archives on therightsideradio.com. Everything that we discussed, Timothy and I, what I said has come to bear. What Timothy has said, a major mouthpiece for the Obama administration, has not come to pass. But Dr. Kawa is a medical professional, and he is the first doctor of his type that we have had on the show. Why don't you tell me what your beef is with Obamacare?
Well, great question, Reid. Here's my beef, is that the president does not have a right to make or change an existing law. Per Article 1 of the Constitution, only Congress can make or change a law, and obviously they consist of our elected officials. It's for the public to choose who we represent us to make or change laws. Article 2 charges the president with an affirmative duty to enforce those existing laws, and this president has poked the Constitution in the eye because he has determined that he is a Congress of one, and he doesn't really need their input. And just because the law is named after him does not give him the right to make or change it. It's not his law. Unfortunately, it's our law, but it's our law to make or change through our Congress and through our representatives, not through him. And on July 2nd, this president, on the first day of an 8-day-long trip to Africa, which, by the way, cost the taxpayer $100 million, decided that he was going to tweet a change to the law, doing things by executive fiat, as he's really earned a reputation for doing. And, if it's something you're proud of doing, you do it while you're here to face the music and in front of the face of the American people, not on a plane to Africa for an 8-day trip, hoping the shockwaves are going to die down by the time you get back. But the point is that he decided that he was going to claim to have unilaterally waived the employer mandate. And by the way, the reason I say claim to is because I feel it still hasn't been waived, because the way to waive it is only legislatively, not through a tweet. And at least I think...
And Dr. Carl, let me interject for just a moment. I agree 100%. We'll talk a little bit about the kind of botched Republican strategy in this regard further on in the show. I think it'll interest people. But, folks, I know you liberals out there who listen to me because you just love to hate me. What you're saying is, well, Obama was elected. We have a majority. We won. I mean, I see that all the time in my emails. Here's the bottom line. Congress represents the diversity of the American people by region, by gender, by political belief, by religious belief, whether or not you like that. They represent all the people. Barack Obama represents only the 51.8% that elected him. And there is a big difference between 100% representation of many diverse groups, which you get through Congress, which Dr. Kawa is completely correct in. They have the only constitutional right to make or change a law, and a president who operates as a tyrant, basically. Go ahead, please, Dr. Kawa.
Well, I think that the president is dipping his toes in the water of tyranny to see how we're going to respond. You know, politicians are much like your spouse. They say you marry three people: the person you thought they were, the person they really were, and then the person they've become as a result of being married to you. Well, the politicians are the same way, right?
I think I've heard that.
Well, you teach people how to treat you, and if we, through our tacit silence, just sit here and endorse him by doing nothing, we're really sending the wrong message. We're saying this was okay. Well, we got to ask ourselves, what makes it okay for a president to do something apart from the will of Congress? And it's a really important question, because I want to remind you that Article 6, Section 2 of the Constitution, which I think we're going to hear more about in the next year or so, says that if there's an international treaty which conflicts with the Constitution will bow its head to that international treaty, and all it takes for us to engage in one is two things: presidential signature and the Senate not to reject it, meaning they don't vote on it, they don't bring it to the floor. Things like the Small Arms Treaty to take away your Second Amendment gun rights. Things like the United States Missile Defense Shield in outer space, the Space Debris Treaty. LOST, the Law of the Sea Treaty, which gives up our offshore drilling rights in other nations the right to shut down our Navy, saying we're polluting the oceans. The UN...
all of which, excuse me, Dr. Kawa, all of
Sure.
which, folks, I have done shows on. Go back in the archives. You can hear detailed shows, including the interview of experts on each and every one of these treaties, and, of course, Agenda 21, which I've been on Coast to Coast and Republic Radio about. And this is all the imposition of global-type governments, the subjection of American sovereignty to the will of foreigners. And it is something that Barack Obama, if you read his books, thinks is a really good thing. And there's three things that stand in the way of what he and his minions of progressives want: faith, family, and the Constitution. You'll notice that he is attacking all three. Dr. Kawa is completely correct. He is pushing the envelope to see who's going to seal it.
Well, I would say this, Reid. He has no more right than you or I to change an existing law, and he is not a Congress of one. And by the way, to our liberal friends on the other side of the aisle that want to call us obstructionists, here's a really important point. The president is the obstructionist, since he's the one who wants to stand in the way of an existing law. We are trying to enforce the law. Myself, in conjunction with my team of attorneys, and Judicial Watch are trying to enforce the existing law, so we're not the obstructionists. He's the obstructionist. He's the member of the party of no. We are the party of yes. We don't like the law, but we're gonna let it take its course. You know, President Ulysses S. Grant said it best when he said, the best way to repeal a bad law is to enforce it vigorously. And really that is what we are set out to do here. And you know, he took an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. And what underscores the hypocrisy of both he and his administration is that he is the one that we most need to protect it from.
You know what?
He spoke the Constitution in the eye. Yeah.
You call it hypocrisy, I call it treason.
Well, whatever you call it, it's certainly wrong. It's something he shouldn't have done. And you'll be happy to know the defendants on my lawsuit include the IRS, the acting commissioner of the IRS, Daniel Warfel, the Department of the Treasury, and the Secretary of the Department of Treasury, former Chief of Staff.
You mean Dan? Yeah, I mean, if you've seen the hearings, you mean Daniel Waffle.
Yeah, Daniel Waffle, not Warfel.
Yeah.
So he lies about his lies and then says that he didn't say it. Yeah, we have a president.
He has a great mentor. He has Barry.
He has Barry, right, who claims that he never said certain things. He never said you could keep your doctor or you could keep your insurance. I guess you could say Clinton didn't inhale and he didn't exhale. So Nobody said anything. So, well, There's millions of patriots like myself out there that are willing to put themselves in harm's way and say, if you want to attack the Constitution, you're going to have to come through us. And we need to also think from a practicality perspective in terms of how this law is going to subsist. Because, look, you can't both love creating jobs and hate the job creators. Nobody ever got a job from a poor man. How in the world are you going to punish the job creators with punitive taxes and at the same time expect them to remain just as incentivized? Clearly not going to happen.
Well, listen, it's not just the job creators. And the show, folks, I got 4 shows I've done on Obamacare with experts, including an Obama administration mouthpiece. Go into the archives, listen to them. This is an attack, and we're going to talk about this later in the show, on women and families. I don't even know if you know about the marriage and divorce penalty, which is in this bill. Have you heard about that?
Yeah, there's the family glitch. There's a lot of little nuances, I'm sure, that none of us even know about.
Yeah, it's a glitch, all right. No, these are all purposeful. Look, if a family, I'm going to digress for just a moment, but if you're going to pay, and there were several examples, in fact, I'm going to have it posted on the website along with the other articles with this show. One of the things I do, Dr. Kawa, is post a number of articles with every show so that people can do their own research. They're from many different sources, left, right, in between, from the government, stats, you name it. I'm going to post that article, but folks, to break it down roughly, read the article for the exact figures. If you are a married couple and you're making, let's say, $100,000 a year, and the wife is making 25 or 30 and the guy's making 70, however you want to split it. If you were single and individual and you were going into the Obamacare plan, you would be paying a total, and this is divided by income, of about $3,500 a year for your premiums. As a married couple, you will be paying just under $10,000. It is a 200% penalty. It is basically an incentive to divorce and a disincentive to marry. It is a marriage penalty. And remember what he has to attack to get what the progressives want: faith, the Constitution,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
and family. Go right ahead, Doctor.
Well, I was going to bring up another interesting quandary, is that this law does not take into account, when you're calculating subsidies, it does not take into account your assets, only your income. Now, Medicaid basically takes into consideration both. So let's assume you're a multimillionaire and you have your money in stocks that do not produce dividends or income. You would not qualify for Medicaid because it's taking into account both your assets and your income. However, you could conceivably qualify for subsidies on the exchange if your income is below a certain level. Now, if it's too low, you won't get subsidies, you'll get Medicaid. So if you were a multimillionaire and you had your money in stocks that produced zero income, you wouldn't get any subsidies. You would only get Medicaid. Now, if you converted your stocks to something that produced just a little bit of residual income, now suddenly you're going to get a subsidy on the exchange because you make more than that amount, which you would qualify for Medicaid, but not enough that you wouldn't qualify for a subsidy. So the bottom line is, it's very easy for someone who's uber rich to qualify for subsidies by making sure that their passive income is at a certain controlled or titrated level. Now, bear in mind that an individual can make up to $46,000 a year, still get subsidies. A family of 4 could make up to $94,000 a year and still get subsidies. And who's giving them the subsidies is each other. People are massaging themselves, so to speak. So it's just, you can't give away what you don't have, and trying to confiscate that wealth from others is not going to work. You can't both love creating jobs and hate the job creators and decide you're going to confiscate their money. Just bear in mind the government doesn't have any inherent money of its own. It can't give a dime to someone until it's taken a dime from someone else who's already earned it.
That's right. I say this often on this show. The government has one source of revenue, your pocket and your property. That's all they got, folks. And
you're right.
These subsidies, I don't even like to use the word subsidy, because these subsidies are not subsidies. If somebody gives you $10 in subsidies and charges you $15 in other various assorted taxes, i.e. the $675 billion, which is just the first, folks, I guarantee you it's just the first, that went into effect in January, and socks it to you on premiums because you're a 30-year-old male and you are mandated to have maternity and prenatal coverage, that money, you're getting no subsidies, folks. Nothing in this is free. They're taking out of your left pocket and putting in somebody else's right pocket, putting it back in your pocket, taking out of your left pocket again. You are not ahead whatsoever. In fact, you're way behind, and we're going to be talking about that in this show too. But Dr. Kawa, tell us about your lawsuit.
Well, here's what it stems from. We filed in federal district court on October 1st here in the Southern District of Palm Beach County, Florida, and we filed under the Administrative Procedure Act of 1946, which is an old act that was put on the books to make sure that there were no tyrants in government. And basically, if an official has done a power grab or an authoritative overreach, as long as you are injured, meaning you can have what's called standing, you are then able to have your case heard by a federal judge, but you have to prove standing. Now, here's my standing or my injury. Earlier this year, prior to the time the president allegedly waived the employer mandate, I went and paid attorneys to make sure that my office was compliant with the Obamacare law. Even though I think it's a bad law, I'm still a law-abiding citizen. And on July 2nd, he went ahead and moved the goalposts and said, I'm going to waive the employer mandate. Now, what that basically means is he has now said to me, whatever money and energy and time and resources you put into vetting your business, now you just threw that away because now I just changed the rules illegally. So that's what gives us standing. And by the way, that means that on a quarterly basis from now until eternity, I would have to make sure that I have my attorneys check that my business is still in compliance, not with the law, but with his tweets. So he tweets, and I have to jump and call my attorneys and make sure that I'm still doing what is whimsically correct to him, not the intent of our elected officials. So once we gain standing, which we expect that we will have within the next few weeks or so, then we will have our case heard by a federal judge. We expect that the administration is going to try to dismiss the case, but in order to do that, they're going to have to come up with a rationale or a defense to explain how the president waived the employer mandate and what legal authority he has. And he's been asked, by the way, and I'm sure many times you and all of our listeners have heard him say, let me be clear. Well, we've asked him.
I love that oxymoron beginning. I love that.
Well, we're going to let him be clear, this time in front of a courtroom, but we're going to let him be clear. And his answer, by the way, was that he has the legal authority, but he refuses to disclose until a later date what that authority is. Well, if you're going to be clear, what are you waiting for? Go ahead and be clear. So that's his answer. And you may remember he said that his administration was going to have as its touchstones transparency and the rule of law. I really don't see either of those reflected in his actions.
Well, I happen to agree with you 100%. And listen, that's not the only change, folks. We've been over in the other shows. There's been 17 substantive changes by this law by executive fiat. The employer mandate is the one that you hear about mostly on the mainstream media. But others range the gamut. And many of them are major. I think, my thought on this law, I want to digress just a little bit from this lawsuit, and we're going to come back to it because I have an idea. I know a lot of other media listen to this show. I see our shows, in fact, on many other websites, other AM stations, sometimes on TV, which is great. I mean, that is why I do this show. But if you have a situation where a law is obviously, I mean, this is so apparent now, it is a botched mess from its mechanics, i.e. the website, to its managers, i.e. Sebelius, Obama, and crew, that you have not been told the truth about, that is, no matter how you do the math, we've been over this math on other shows, please go back, listen to it. The deal is $1.4 trillion in the hole right now. That's after the $715 billion cut in Medicare. That's after the $675 billion in new cuts, two-thirds of which falls on the middle class in January. The CBO, if you go to their annualized projections, folks, you can go right to the website, and maybe I'll even post it, but they show $265 billion a year cost in 2023. What they're only showing you when they talk about $100 billion savings, or they're talking about a $1.8 trillion cost, is projections through 2022, 9 years. I mean, all you got to do is read it, kind of do the math. At $265 billion a year, it's $2.7 trillion cost. And we have raised $1.2 trillion, the $715, the $675. Now, that other $1.4 trillion, give or take $100 billion amongst friends, I mean, where do you think that's going to come from, folks? You think you're getting a subsidy? Really? And if the law continues, and that's if everything is a hot knife through butter, if the law continues on its current course, we're talking about deficits that could be, or problems with the law in terms of financial footings that could be in the $3, $4, $5, $6 trillion range. Where do you think that money is going to come from? So I'm kind of building a base here. Number one, Dr. Kawa is telling you what he has done as a patriot to stand up for the Constitution and for the American people. But I got some ideas about what a lot of other people could do, too. Dr. Kawa, please continue. Sorry for the digression.
Sure, no worries. I'd also like to make the point that the CBO is provably either corrupt or ignorant, and here's how I could show it. Prior to the passage of this law, the CBO said that it would cost $900 billion. Weeks after the passage of the law, with nothing else changing, they then said, sorry, we were off by triple. It's $2,800 billion. So, frankly, the CBO should all be fired. They're theoretically a nonpartisan group of economists, but how do you make a mistake like that? Again, it's either corruption or ignorance, but one or the other must be factually true.
Well, it's the same way the president misspoke on 27 different occasions over 3 years, you know. You can keep your doctor, I guarantee it, period.
Right.
I mean, they just misspoke. You know, their calculator didn't have batteries. It was, who knows what it was. So,
well, you know, here's an interesting point, by the way, Reid, is that on July 17th, the Republican U.S. House said that we're going to agree with you, we're going to allow you to waive the employer mandate, and we're going to also waive the individual mandate. We're going to exempt America. And the president said that he will veto any action on the part of Congress to agree with him, even if it's to waive either of the two mandates. Now, why would he do that? It's due to the pay-go rule, and his manipulative skills is that he knows that if Congress agrees with him and it's done legally or the right way, he's got to come up with $10 billion in cuts to his precious entitlement programs, and he doesn't want to do that. But, the CBO scored this.
There's a lot of political shenanigans woven into the health care law. But what I want to talk about is, you know, why Republicans, I mean, I'm listening to these Republicans talk about, we have to delay the individual mandate, we have to do this, what they should be saying, in my opinion, is you don't get to delay anything. This is how the Constitution works. We will do whatever is legally necessary to enforce it, kind of like what you're doing, Dr. Kawa. And you will follow this law to the letter.
Agreed. They should eat their own cooking.
To the letter, you sit down with us. We'll come up with legislation that takes care of both our concerns. But instead, you know, time is kind of an ally of the president. It's not an ally of the opponents of the law. And what they're doing is they're buying him time. You know, the next thing you're going to see is some nonsense where the employer mandate kicks back in a month before the election. And now there's studies coming out, as I'm sure many of you have heard, maybe not all. I'm sure Dr. Kawa is familiar with. We're talking about somewhere between 53 and 129 million people more losing their insurance because employer-mandated insurance will not have maternity coverage for 30-year-old male employees.
Right. Well,
so you know, once again, the whole thing comes down to politics, and boy, I'm sick of it. So, Dr. Kawa, where are you at with the suit, and when exactly are you going to kick their ass?
I've got my boots on now, the pointy tip ones, but we filed on October 1st. They had 60 days to respond. It's a possibility the judge will give them an extra 15 days for the shutdown, but they have no later than December 15th to reply, which would be either a motion to dismiss, which would be virtually impossible or corrupt because there's absolutely no legal authority that they're going to come up with to claim that the president had the right to do this, or they're going to have to answer and defend the case, and then the judge could potentially give a summary judgment without even a trial and rule upon it, but there would then have to be a ruling. We first have to have the judge give us standing, which we believe that he will, I still have confidence in the judicial system, the last of the three branches of government that we might have a prayer with, and then we're gonna hope for the best. And once we have standing, it would be virtually impossible for an honest judge to write a briefing explaining, predicated on what logic he's going to say that we don't have standing, and once we plead our case, predicated upon what logic we don't have a point.
Well, here's my prognostication. They will come in with a motion to dismiss because they're the government and they don't care how much money of ours they spend, because it buys them time and time is their ally. When that motion to dismiss is thrown out, they will, of course, attack standing, and that may be part of the motion to dismiss. Then they're going to try and get down in the weeds. They're going to try and confuse the constitutional issue by pointing to provisions in the law itself which give incredible authority to the executive branch. One of the things which people are going to start hearing about, I'm going to put the article with this show, folks, you need to read this article, is that there is a kickback law. There's a law that the Congress passed that does not allow kickbacks on federal contracts, deals, legislation, you name it. Do you know that in this bill, I'm not making this up, you can read it for yourself, the kickback provision, the executive branch, this is either the head of HHS or the president, can waive the kickback provision if they deem it necessary in special circumstances. I want you to think about that for a while. And,
well, it's interesting you say that, Reid, because the president has said that the reason that he's deviating from the Constitution is because we're not in any normal environment. Now, where in the Constitution does it say you can deviate if the environment's just not normal?
Well, obviously the Constitution does not say that. I mean, this is more made up. Just like you can keep your doctor, I guarantee it, period. So, when this guy moves his lips, he's lying. He's lied about Benghazi and continues to lie about Benghazi. And remember, folks, lies are they take two tangents. One is to misrepresent something to somebody by omission, and that means you know something that's really material, but you don't say it in your statement, and it would change the context and the foundation of the statement, with the assertion that you're making. And then the other is, of course, to lie, as most of us think about it, by saying the wrong thing. This guy does it both ways beautifully, all the time, 100%, without fail.
Well, they say a true diplomat is somebody who could tell you to go to hell in such a way that you actually look forward to the trip. That's him.
That's right. Cut your throat with a feather.
Yep.
So how long do you think it will take? I don't think you're going to get, I hope you do, but I'm not sure you're going to get summary judgment on this. So how long would it take for this to wind into a trial?
It would probably take about 3 months is what my guesstimate is. I may be wrong. It's entirely up to the judge. Could be a little less, a little more, but probably 3 months, if anything, maybe a little bit more. But there have been 70 cases filed under Obamacare, and virtually all of them have been dismissed due to lack of standing. And by the way, some of them were filed knowing there would be a lack of standing. There's only maybe 2 or 3 cases out there, including ours, which legitimately will very likely have standing. And what's unique about our case is we're not trying to dismantle the law. We're trying to enforce it.
Exactly. And, Oklahoma has the same tact, but on the state's level. And their lawsuit is moving forward, too. It's one of the several that have survived the standing question.
Correct. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
What I was going to say is the Oklahoma case basically is predicated upon the thought that what it actually says, and they're correct, in Obamacare, is that in order to get a subsidy, it can only be through a state-sponsored exchange. So only 14 states have purely state-sponsored exchanges. The other 36 states have either federal or federally assisted exchanges, in which case you would not qualify for a subsidy. So I think the Oklahoma case is a terrific case as well.
Well, not only is it a terrific case, but it built upon the actual ruling which allowed this law to live to begin. The liberals always crow about the fact this was duly voted in. I mean, I won't even go into the midnight shenanigans on Christmas Eve, so in 2009, that this was duly voted in, and it's been upheld by the Supreme Court as the law of the land. It's the law. You can't change. You can't do this, blah, blah, blah. Hey, guys, liberals, libs out there, you progressives, guess what? There was a second major part of that ruling by the Supreme Court, And that said that the federal government cannot enforce its will relative to this law on the states. And you know what? Oklahoma's going to win. Because
I hope so.
It's already settled law by the Supreme Court.
Yep, you're right. And Indiana, by the way, has the case on the origination clause, which says that if this truly is a tax, not a penalty, and taxes are revenues, and the Constitution says that all bills to raise revenues must originate in the House, well, bear in mind, Obamacare originated in the Senate, so how could that be?
Perfect. Love it.
Yeah.
That one I'm not that familiar with, but that's a great little twist. I just love it. Love it to pieces.
And by the way, I was going to point out one more thing, Reid. On
please.
Federal Register in July of 2010, page 34,552, it says that 66% of all small employers will lose their insurance, 45% of all large employers will lose their insurance. And that is the CBO estimate. And 27 times subsequent to that, this president looked America in the eye and lied and said, you can keep your insurance. So he must have just not read his own Federal Register.
Yeah, that was the 53 million to 129 million figure I threw out. The 129 million figure, folks, I'm trying to get the link for you. I don't have it yet, but hopefully I'll have it when the show is posted on the archives, was by an economist who, by the way, is a liberal economist at Duke University. Just came out 2 or 3 days ago. 129 million people are going to have their health care coverage and their doctors screwed with under this law. So, the liberals right now are saying, it's only going to affect 5%. I mean, who cares about those 15 million people? It's for the greater good. The next shoe to drop, of course, is going to be cost. And the next shoe to drop is going to be the cost of the entire deal. And the next shoe to drop is going to be the employer deal, which the Democrats are going to desperately try to get back after next year's election. You just wait and see what's going to happen. Doctor, I got a question to ask you. And by the way, thank you for bringing that suit. It's going to be a battle. You're wrestling with an elephant, and may you pin its ears back. So, tell us a little bit about, because there's bits and pieces, and I don't think people really understand. I think they're getting the part where you're not going to be able to keep your doctor, where you're not going to be able to keep your coverage, where your premiums are going to go up, where there's a bunch of crap in your plan that you will never. 50-year-old women are not going to be using prenatal care. That is being used to kind of as a subterfuge to funnel money in other directions. But I don't think they get what's going to happen with their hospitals. Tell the folks a little bit about how this is affecting hospitals. And just in the last few days, you're starting to hear little bits and glimmers here and there about hospitals opting out.
Well, let's talk about deductibles in that sense, because
sure.
I want to point out that the devil is in the deductibles. I mean, I would say to our liberal friends in New York who think they're going to save a few pennies on their premiums, well, do you really want to just save a few pennies on your premiums while you lose thousands of dollars on your deductible? What if your premiums do go down by a couple of dollars and your deductible goes up by $5,000? Is that something you really want? They got to see the big picture. Along your lines of the hospitals, I mean, this is going to destroy hospitals. I mean, there's 4,000 hospitals in the United States. They say that probably half of them will not be able to subsist under this. I think that what would be imperative upon the listeners is to go on YouTube and put in Obama 2003 AFL-CIO speech, where he clearly admits in front on camera that he wants to have a single-payer system. That was on June 30th, 2003, and then on June 15th, 2009, he said that he never said it. On video again, saying that he doesn't want a single payer. He never wanted a single payer. Well, we know the public option is a Trojan horse for a single payer. Single payer, by the way, basically means the government will tell you how much you can charge if you're a doctor. And that's just the beginning, because healthcare is only one profession. How would you feel if you owned a restaurant and they said, well, this is how much you're going to charge for a hamburger? Because they're already telling the insurance companies, you are not legally allowed to make more than a 20% profit margin. You got to spend 80 cents of every dollar doing business. I can't imagine somebody telling me that my profit margin is limited by a bigger and bigger federal government.
And by the way, that's a subterfuge, because the average profits of a health insurance company are about 2.5% a year. So that's
absolutely.
That's not a figure they like to throw out. They'd rather make people think that they're making 40 and 50%, and we're limiting them to 20. Guys, folks out there, 2.5%. Google it up. Go to the Chamber of Commerce of the United States. Go to any insurance company site you want. Go to their stock records on the New York Stock Exchange. That's what they make. Their margin is razor thin. And by the way, if this plan doesn't work, well, when this plan doesn't work, these insurance companies are going to be in a world of hurt. And they're going to start folding. And that's all part of getting you into single payer. This is all part of a really brilliant but really, really sinister scheme, I will call it. So, but to explain to people a little bit more on the hospitals. So you have Hospital XYZ in small town USA.
Right.
Exactly why are they going to go out of business?
Well, hospitals can't exist without doctors and the hospitals making a profit. And when you overregulate an industry the way they've overregulated, hospitals and doctors, you're going to put the squeeze on their profit margin. I mean, many hospitals, like community hospitals, will get donations from private philanthropists, but not enough to allow them to subsist. But when you say to a hospital, you're going to have to charge X amount for this type of a visit and no more, and they know that amount is less than their cost, how are you going to be able to knowingly, in advance, know you're going to run a business forcibly in the negatives? The law is forcing you to run in the red permanently. I mean, it's going to put you out of business.
So they'll do it in a combination of ways. Number one, let's face it, these high deductibles, I personally think, are all part of the grand scheme. Because how many people, if they have an event, young, healthy, whatever you want to call it, they have an event, your point on the premiums versus the deductibles is terrific. I mean, you want to be, folks, you don't want to be tripping over $1 to pick up a penny. I mean, that's basically what Dr. Kawa is saying. So Let's say you have an unfortunate event. You're in an accident, fall off the ladder. Who knows what happens? And you have, and let me tell you, I'm familiar with this for a lot of different reasons. Unfortunately, not myself. But if you go to the hospital and you get any kind of treatment, any kind of tests, if you're in the hospital for just a few days, $10,000 can go by like the flash of a hummingbird flying away from a petunia. I mean, that's how fast that money can be spent. Now, most people are not going to be able to pay that $10,000. Wouldn't you agree, Dr. Kawa?
I would agree.
I mean, they don't have $10,000 saved up. So you have one whammy, which is all these unfortunate accidents and or illnesses that people have not foreseen, which mandates expenditures up to and above the deductibles, these huge deductibles. Most of them are not going to be paid. Number two, you're telling doctors how they have to operate within the confines of the hospital, which limits the services they can provide, which limits revenues. And number three, you're telling the hospitals what they can charge for those services, which of course puts a squeeze on doctors who are getting paid to perform the services in the hospitals, and then next puts a squeeze on the hospital because the services, as Dr. Kawa explained, the cost of them is less than what they're getting paid under these new government regulations. But here's my question to you.
Mm-hmm.
Why do they want, and I don't really understand this myself, why would they want hospitals to go out of business?
I don't know that they want the hospitals to go out of business. I know that some of them are going to have to go out of business. I think that they want the hospitals to come crawling to them saying, we need you, we're going to go with single payer, we're going to go on your side, because if it's a choice between that or take the doors off the place, well, that's what they're going to do. But I want to touch on another point, is the independent advisory boards, the quote-unquote death panels.
The IPAB, yes.
The IPAB, and I want to ask our listeners to compare that with what they saw with the prejudice that happened with the IRS scandal. Just bear in mind it is the same prejudiced people that are weaponizing the IRS against conservatives that are now going to be controlling the 12 out of the 15 presidentially appointed members of the independent advisory board. So they're going to know if you're a registered Republican or a Democrat. Now, if you need a big operation and they know you just sued the government, they know you're a Republican, they know you're voting the other side of the aisle, what do you think are your chances they're going to approve your operation compared with approving the operation of a Democrat. It's their way of basically, literally, survival of the liberalist.
Yes, it's political eugenics.
Yep. Well
That's exactly what it is political eugenics. And, folks, you may be rolling your eyes. Let me tell you, don't roll your eyes. The NSA reads your emails and knows your phone calls. There's other government agencies, including the NSA, that knows exactly what websites you visit. They even know if you're listening to this show, whether you listen to Sean Hannity, whether you listen to Rush Limbaugh, whether you listen to Alan Combs. Okay, they know all this stuff. And then to get into Obamacare, which many of you are going to be forced to go into despite all your reluctance because it's your only option, you have to fill out an entirely new set of criteria and your medical records on top of your financial records, on top of your browsing records, on top of your email records, on top of your political and religious faith records, are all going to be in this data bank. And you know who is going to have access to it? Read the law, the IPAB.
Right. There's a 125,000 square foot facility being built in Salt Lake City, Utah right now, which is the government's brain, and that's where they are going to store all of this information. Google it, you'll see it, pictures of it. It's huge.
Nope, you are absolutely correct, and I happen to believe that is one of the mass sinister intents that underlies the cloak of warm, fuzzy words, which are so good at casting in our direction all the time.
Well, it's all for the good of the people, right, Reid?
Yeah, it's all, well, the good of the elite. Tell the folks a little bit about, because, there's this hue and cry over, this is one of the changes, by the way, that Obama made unconstitutionally, and that was to give exemptions to he and his family, his administration, and Congress, many of whom in Congress don't want it. Tell us a little bit about that.
I'm glad you brought that up because many of the listeners have heard about Congress being exempt without understanding the specifics. So to quote a famous person, let me be clear. Here's their exemption, Reid. Every member of Congress, every member of their immediate families, every one of their staffers and their immediate families have all been granted a $5,000 per year tax-free, I repeat, tax-free bonus. That means that they do not have to pay Medicare and Social Security taxes on it, even though they will later benefit from the Medicare and Social Security system that they're not paying into.
Folks, that $5,000 is from your pocket.
Yep.
They didn't print the money; it came from your pocket.
And it's the truth. So you're paying them a tax-free bonus. Now, if I wanted to give a bonus to one of my own employees, I would have to pay, and they would have to pay, federal, MICA, and FICA, Medicare and Social Security taxes, not Congress. They're better than us. They don't have to do that. So not only are they exempt from Obamacare, they're exempt from paying their Medicare and Social Security taxes. Now, if that doesn't get you riled up, you just don't have a pulse. So if it's good enough for us and our families, why isn't it not good enough for them and their families? And I would ask you to ask yourselves, if it's so great, not only why are they exempt, why are they in their pet districts exempt, like Harry Reid's district in Nevada, Nancy Pelosi's entire district in California? They're exempt from something that's supposed to be great. So, it's interesting, not one Republican voted for this law, so the Democrats that exempted themselves knew what they were doing when they exempted themselves from it. Well, they knew it was horrific.
I want to point out to people, this is like one of those facts that slap you in the face because it's so blatant that you don't think about it. The Democrats, folks, voted unanimously to take away your health care plan. They voted unanimously, not one Republican, to interfere with your special relationship with your doctor. They voted unanimously to create an entitlement which is going to cost this country trillions. They voted unanimously to raise the taxes to pay for this, except, unfortunately, they don't. And they voted unanimously not to delay any part of this law, all the while, of course, blaming the Republicans for it. This law is a unanimous Democratic boondoggle. Think about that when you go to the polls in 2014.
And I would recommend that nobody vote for anybody that wants to delay this law, because I want to remind you, delaying it is being kind to it. It's saying, you know what, we're gonna give you a chance to go ahead and fix yourself. I say force it into its own dug grave. Let it collapse under the weight of its own problems. Don't give it a chance to fix itself. And you know what? We'll have a bad year, but I'd rather have a bad year than a bad lifetime for ourselves and our kids and grandkids. Let the law collapse, because giving it a year is giving it a year to fix itself, and I don't think it deserves that year. That's why I think it should be enforced. There are some politicians that would be out there saying, let's give it a chance, let's delay it. What would we be delaying it for? It's not kind to delay it. It's just foolish. It should be enforced. That's the way to get rid of it. When your opponent wants to hang himself, you don't take away the rope.
Yeah, and folks, this law is going to affect the debt and deficit of this country. It's going to affect the financial footings of this country, which are already wobbly as can be. Last week's show with Craig Smith, and next week with his partner on progressivism, the 100 years of progressivism and what it's done to us and where we can expect to go if we don't get this under control. We're going to be going into that next week, so stay tuned because, once again, all this stuff is tied in. But in the Obamacare law, Dr. Kawa, this is very important. A lot of my listeners are gals. Mm-hmm. So in the Obamacare law, why don't you explain to these gals, I've had another guest on who was an expert in this particular subject, but we didn't really have time to cover everything that we needed to. The Democrats jump up and down and talk about the war on women. Now, as far as I know, the biggest war on women is Sharia, which the president seems to support. But putting that aside, tell us about how Obamacare appears to help women. Their $10 free birth control every month, whatever. But in reality, penalizes them.
Well, what it does is it takes away freedom of choice. So in other words, you no longer are going to have the options of having a plan that is custom tailored to your own needs. The motto of Mercedes-Benz is the best or nothing. Well, the president has determined that that's what he wants for you because he knows it's not going to be the best. It's going to be nothing. He knows that the way to dismantle the insurance industry and get what he wants, which is total control through single payer, is to make sure you don't have freedom of choice. He's going to make sure that you have to purchase things that you don't want. You're going to have, men that are required to purchase maternity care. You're going to have women that are past maternity age that have to pay for maternity care. You have the poorest generation, the youth, paying for those who have saved up their whole lives, the elderly generation, and you've raided the Medicare Trust Fund in order to make that happen. So he's really taken away freedom of choice from the party that touts the merits of freedom of choice. I guess it only suits him in the sense of religious right and abortion rights and that. But when it comes to freedom of choice, in regards to that of consumer advocacy, he decides that he's going to deny America that right. And they say the rates for women are going to go up by 69%. The rates for men are going to go up by 99%. So whether you're a male or a female, I guess the only ones that their rates won't go up for are the hermaphrodites.
Yeah, folks, I'm going to have a map. It's going to be the very first posting. It's a map of the United States. You can click on it. You can see what the projected incredible rise in premiums and costs to you in your state will be. It was put together by Forbes. So that is going to be post number 1 on this show. But I want to go even further into the details on how this is screwing women, literally. And
right.
So you're a 50-year-old gal. Now, obviously, you're not going to be having any more kids. Why exactly is it that you're going to lose your old Cadillac plan, your Blue Cross plan, whatever it happens to your Humana, your Aetna, because that plan, number 1, did not have in it maternity care and prenatal care. Number 2, the plan, if still offered to you, would be illegal, and the insurance company would have to pay a fine under the law. Number 3, they therefore had to change the plan. And number 4, the grandfather clause was written purposefully, and they knew in 2010 there's been loads of news stories. They debated it in the White House. But because of the law mandates certain things which are in nobody's insurance. No 50-year-old woman has maternity coverage. No 30-year-old man has maternity coverage. I'm using just that one example. The law mandates that they do. The law mandates that if the insurance company offers somebody, the 30-year-old male or the 50-year-old gal, a plan that does not have maternity coverage, they're going to pay a huge fine. They'll be in violation of the law. The insurance company, therefore, has to cancel the plan, and therefore you are without insurance, including Cadillac plans. Don't believe this nonsense about all these plans are crap. Many of these plans, most of these plans are good, solid plans, and many, many hundreds of thousands are Cadillac plans that are being lost right now, and you cannot replace them. So talk to us a little bit about using that example of the poor 50-year-old gal who is way beyond child.
Well, here's a way that it's going to cost her more money. You know, if you've had the same insurance prior to Obamacare being signed into law, March 23rd, 2010, you're grandfathered in. Now, if you drop that plan or you lose that plan, regardless of the rationale of why, you lose your grandfather status. And then to buy a new plan is far more expensive than to have a plan that was grandfathered in. And again, according to the CBO, the vast majority of plans would and will be lost. And a lot of people are being dropped, and it's not just a few. It's literally millions of people, tens of millions of people that are losing their plans and their grandfather status. This is really just an extension.
And it's not the insurance companies. It is the law which is forcing the insurance companies to add things which creates a change which mandates that it be dropped. It all comes back to the law.
Correct. He knows that people are not fond of insurance companies to begin with, so they're very easy targets to blame. So he's going to say, well, I told you you could keep your plan, but it's not up to me if the insurance company decides they're going to drop it. Well, it is up to you when you're determining that the terms of those plans are illegal. So then when it's dropped, you act like a deer in headlights, but the fact is that you're the one that forced the insurance company to drop it in the first place. It goes back to the old joke, someone walks up to someone in the street and they see someone walking their dog. They say, does your dog bite? And the lady says, no. He pets the dog bites him. And the lady says, well, that's not my dog. Well, same thing with the insurance plan. The president says you can keep your insurance if you want it, but then he says, by the way, that wasn't insurance. It wasn't good enough. That's not a plan. That's a plan for failure. It's got to be this good, or it's just not something that's allowed to be in the marketplace. So what you had is deemed a plan because it wasn't good enough. So the only plans are the ones that include maternity for men?
Yes, and prenatal for women over 50. You bet.
Exactly. It's ridiculous. It's forcing you to purchase things you obviously don't need and don't want.
Well, listen, we're going to take a quick station idea, and when we come back, I want to talk about a little idea I have that would really be quite the lawsuit, be the lawsuit of the century, I think. And I want to go over your website
Sure.
so people can go and take a look at exactly what's going on there and a couple other things as we wrap up the show. So we will be back in just a minute, Right Side Radio audience.
Land. For love and money, the beauty of the land provokes something primal. It fills us with awe and makes us yearn for land of our own. My land. Those words evoke a sense of security and a place in the world. Yet the word land also evokes nitty-gritty financial issues, business, improvement, taxes, profit. In Volume 1 of Land for Love and Money, rancher Reid Rosenthal uses his award-winning style to tell us real stories, the hard-hitting truth your banker forgot to tell you about all types, sizes, and locations of land. For those drawn to land purchase, ownership, management, preservation, and sale in good times and in bad. Reid's intense love of the land, his devotion to wild and remote places, and his extensive experience with land purchase and sale throughout 2 continents make him uniquely qualified to write Land for Love and Money. A bestseller already, Land for Love and Money is available at landforloveandmoney.com, Barnes & Noble, Hastings, Amazon, and fine bookstores everywhere.
Welcome back, folks. Remember, by the way, that Land for Love and Money book, with all the things that are going on financially with this country, Obamacare, the deficit, the debt, the unfunded liabilities, you better have the shekels that you have available in a safe place. I'm not giving you advice. Personally, I like land. It's the only thing that's forever. You can live on it. It can create security for you. It can create memories for you. It's both emotional and financial. So this book, I think, would help you, although I must admit some bias. It was named the Best Real Estate Book of 2012 by USA News and World Report, Best Business Investing Book of the Year in 2013 by USA Book Review, #1 national bestseller. Get it, or get it for somebody that you love who needs this kind of advice. You'll enjoy reading it, too. It's anecdotal. Now, we're back with Dr. Kawa here in the last few minutes of the show. I want to throw out an idea, and then we're going to let Dr. Kawa kind of finish up the show. First of all, I want to give you his web address, and that is
theamerican.net.
There you go, theamerican.net. theamerican.net.
And my email, too, Reid. Yep.
No, please, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, for those of you that would like to contact me directly, I welcome your comments. My personal email address, believe it or not, no one had it, ronaldreagan@reagan.com. So I couldn't resist that one, so I took it.
I absolutely love it. So theamerican.net, folks, take a look at what's going on with this lawsuit, kind of understand the principles behind it, and follow it. Talk to your friends about it, because my idea is that we're getting into the throes. We have 3.5, 4 million people who've lost their policies so far. They've had financial damages, they've had emotional damages, psychological, physical damages, you name it. There's plenty of damages. And I think that there could be a huge class action suit against the government and against Mr. Obama, like maybe his personal assets, because that seems to catch people's attention. Number one, on the fraud that was perpetrated in getting this law passed, fraud in the inducement. You can keep your doctor. I guarantee it, period. You can keep your policy. I guarantee it, period. But more importantly, because what Dr. Kawa has been describing is that this is an authoritative overreach under the statute that he's brought his law on. I unfortunately don't have standing right now, but many of you do, and I'm sure there are patriots out there just like Dr. Kawa, and you ought to give it some thought, and you ought to pass that idea on to others. All right, Dr. Kawa, I'm going to let you wrap it up.
Well, in closing, I'd like to re-encourage our patriots of America to know that there's still millions of us out there that would be willing to stand in harm's way. And for those that want to attack the Constitution, they're going to have to come through us. And I've had many of my friends say, "You're suing the IRS, aren't you scared? You're outnumbered. You're up against the whole government." Well, listen, I'm not here to pat myself on the back, but I will tell you that they're the ones that should be concerned because they're outgunned. I've got the Constitution in one hand and logic in the other, and I will relentlessly pursue this litigation. I've got the help of Judicial Watch. I welcome those of you that want to give me comments. Again, our website is theamerican.net. There is no contribute button. I am not looking to capitalize from this. So for those of you that want to visit our website, there's no place for money, but there's plenty of room for your ideas. So and for your prayers. So thank you for your time. Thank you for having me on the show, Reid. I'm very grateful, and I thank you for the opportunity to discuss this with your listeners.
Dr. Kawa, it's been a pleasure, and I salute you for what you're doing, and I wish I could join in. Maybe one of these days I can.
I welcome you on board.
This is Reid Lance Rosenthal on the right side. We'll see you next Saturday, folks. Great show coming up. This is Craig Smith's partner. He was our guest last week. What progressivism and Obamacare, being a major increment of it now, has done to the United States. Completely factual history from Woodrow Wilson 100 years ago to today, and what the outcome is. So don't miss it, because we're going to be covering a whole bunch of points we did not cover with Craig. And let me tell you, your eyes will glaze, your hair will curl, you won't like it much. Think about your kids. See you next Saturday.
For more information about Reid and his work, please go to ontherightsideradio.com. There you can also click to purchase the first 2 volumes of his #1 best-selling historical Western series, Threads West, An American Saga, and Maps of Fate. And now the first volume of his new nonfiction series, Land for Love and Money, is available everywhere, or go to landforloveandmoney.com. That's Land for Love and Money. We'd also like to remind you that if you've missed any shows, you can go to the show archives on Reid's ontherightsideradio.com webpage. We look forward to seeing you again next week for another episode of Reid Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side.